Good morning. My name's Al Orgeron. For y'all who don't know me, I work for LSU Ag Center. I do the sugarcane weed management and ripener work and a little bit of soybean work. Um, my co-presenter is Dr. Doug Swanhurst from USDA, and he's going to present his information also. So, I guess weeds are keeping me in business. We always seem to be chasing our tail. Once you kind of get some relief from one problem, there's another problem staring you at the face. One we've gotten a lot of calls about over the past about 3 to 4 years is ryegrass that we can't control with Paraquat. It's the only tool in our toolbox that we knew we had to manage this winter weed pest. But when you look at this field was treated twice in 2019 with the 1X labeled rate of Paraquat, which is 3 pints of gramoxone per acre, and you get this situation. So lots and lots of seed. I think Doug and I made a count in this field, and you had about 112 ryegrass plants per square foot. So you do the math. That's a little bit above my pay grade. Um, when we look at problematic areas, it's really in a couple different places where we're seeing this. In Avols Parish in Bunkie, some reports in the Cheneyville area, in Rapides Parish. White Castle was one of the first places that I was made aware of in Iberville Parish. And right across the river on the Sugar Research Station in St. Gabriel, we've had paraquat failures. So this is some of my grad students' work. Alphonse Coco, Doug, and his team uh, let us use their spray chamber, and we did some greenhouse work at the beginning of 2020. So we collected seed from each of these populations, and we planted them, transplanted them to these low containers, and we looked at different rates of paraquat. So uh, here we got a couple different. We got a graph and a couple tables, but the graph on the left is looking at the dose response experiments. So basically, we went from 1/256 of the 3 pint rate all the way up to 32x uh, rate. Um, some of the populations we had more plants than others, but what you see here is on the curve. This is a logarithmic curve for paraquat response when we're looking at injury. Um, the Sweet River population, which is the one with the triangle, is our susceptible. So that means paraquat still works on it. Um, so that curve, when you look at it, it shifted to the left compared to the other three populations, the White Castle, the St. Gabriel, and Bunkie, which were the suspected resistant populations. So when we look at the table one on the left, when you look at the GR50, which is the value to get 50% injury, that amount of paraquat is much higher for those populations that are resistant as compared to the Sweet River population. Uh, when we look at the table at the bottom, percent paraquat resistant Italian ryegrass survival. So basically, this first year of work Alphonse did was screening, and each population and each rate was represented by 4 plants per population. So when you look at 1/4 X rate of the 3 pint rate, the Sweet River is susceptible. We only had 75% of them survive. Uh, when you start looking at the resistant populations, um, the Bunkie population in particular, 100% of it survived a 2X rate, which is 6 pints. So this demonstrates there are definitely some differences in the tolerance of these populations to paraquat. We're gonna continue to do some more of this work this year. In fact, we have a whole lot more uh, seedlings of each population, and we gained a population from Georgia that was resistant to one of the ALS herbicides. And then we also included a commercial ryegrass, Gulf ryegrass that people plant for cattle, to look at it and compare as well. So one of the things we do is we took this lab work, this greenhouse work, and took it to the field. So we went to this location in Bunkie that where we saw that picture earlier, where it was this chock block of wet ryegrass in 2019, and we went in and we wanted to look at different rates of gramoxone, just in case. You know, if really all it took was a 4x rate, I wasn't sure if we could get approval from EPA to bump our rate to that level. But then we wanted to make sure what we did in the greenhouse transferred to the field. So when you look at this research, um, one of the things we did is we increased that rate of gramoxone accordingly, just like what we saw in the previous slide. So in this case, we went from 3 pints all the way to 6 gallons. Now that would represent 6 gallons was a 16x rate. So I mean, it's a lot of paraquat in that sprayer. We went in and rated control at 18 days after treatment and at 35 days after treatment. And we also include Asialox. And you may be thinking Asialox, we use that to control Johnson grass. You're absolutely right. One of the things we always say is you can't use it when it's cool. I know that, but this is a cool season grass, so it grows when temperatures are cool. So I really didn't have any real good evidence that it would work, but we threw it in there just to see. When you look at the labeled rate, the 3 pint rate, very poor control, both at 18 and 35 days, somewhere around 5% control. Um, to get an acceptable control level, in my opinion, we needed to be at that 6 gallon rate. That's a 16x rate. Now, if you remember the slide before, we said the 4x rate did great in that greenhouse. Well, the 4x rate is that gallon and a half. Uh, 40% control at 18 days and 30% at 35 days. That's just not viable. That's not sound. Uh, Surprisingly, the Asialox, when we looked at it at 18 days, this was a gallon of Asialox, gave us 26% control. Kind of expected it slow, but when we got out to 35 days, that control increased to 75%, which is pretty similar to going to that 6 gallon rate of Asialox. In another experiment, we looked at a couple unregistered products, Resolve Q and Caprino, and then we also included Asialox and Invoke. This experiment was done directly behind the first experiment. Um, these products, Resolve Q and Caprino, like I said, are not registered. They gave us some amount of efficacy, but not really where we want to be. And we're not going to pursue those any further in terms of herbicide control. Um, but the Asialox plus Invoke, we went with 2 quarts plus 5/10 of an ounce. Now, when we go for Johnson grass control with this combination, we usually say 2 quarts of Asialox and 3/10 of an ounce. But we bumped it up to 5/10 of an ounce because Dr. Ron Strahan, our turf specialist on campus, said that that rate of Invoke typically does a lot better on some of the harder to control populations of perennial ryegrass, which is a little different from this. So we gave it a shot. And you can see at 35 days, we gained 88% control, which is pretty darn good. Um, but I have to tell you, this year I didn't get nearly as many calls about this paraquat resistant ryegrass as in years past, and I primarily attribute that to producers being able to apply pre-emergence herbicides somewhere in that mid-October range, and really kind of head off a lot of these populations um, at the gate. Uh, they had products like Visor and Strellis. Both of these are esmetolochlor products. They were labeled in late May for use in cane. Um, they were very cost effective. The cost was a whole lot less than some of our other options. Um, I know some growers still use Lumax EZ. It did a really good job, and it had it's a combination of esmetolochlor, atrazine, and mesotrione, but it was priced considerably more than the esmetolochlor alone. Um, Metribuzin does a good job for some of these populations as well as Diuron. And with that said, the population that the Metribuzin and Diuron doesn't work on at all is that White Castle population. For whatever reason, it just is ineffective completely. Um, as I said a second ago, the Visor SMOC2 and Strellis were labeled for cane. Visor predominantly went out in our industry. I did a little survey, and it looked like about 20,000 acres were treated with that product. Just from talking with the different salesmen, 15,000 were treated with Visor itself, is what I was told. So the use rate on a merged cane is just under a quart, 0.98 quarts. Um, at planting or before the cane is emerged, we can put 1.22 quarts of that product, and the maximum application of esmetolochlor per year is 1.77 quarts per acre. Now, one of the things I just want to kind of hit on is we're going to see more combinations of herbicides, including esmetolochlor. We're going to see more esmetolor products come online, is what we're expecting in 2021. I think that's a good thing, and it'll give us some flexibility. In terms of managing paraquat resistant ryegrass, uh, post emerge, I think the work we did last year gave us some answers to help keep this beast under lock. In fact, I got two different calls on Monday about, it's dry enough, I can get in. Uh, I already put a shot of paraquat. It didn't touch it. It walked through. What are my options now? And these are the two options I gave them: 4 quarts of Asialox by itself, or 2 quarts of Asialox plus 5/10 of an ounce of Invoke. We always want to add a non-ionic surfactant with that. Um, and a picture's always worth 1,000 words. This is some work that I did in 2019. This material was put out when we looked at Lumax EZ about mid-October on the right-hand side of the screen versus this was some late planted cane. This was in White Castle, and this Metribuzin applied at planting, and you can see the ryegrass um, that came, and this is a January picture. So using a pre really can help the situation out without a doubt. One of the things that we wanted to look at is when Dr. Griffin first gave his recommendations that we can use paraquat up to 4-leaf green cane. That was done on a variety called 321. It was done in the late to mid 90s in Point Coupee Parish. Varieties have changed. So we wanted to look at a couple different things, and some of this is derived from my grad student Alphonse's project, and some of this research was derived this from a curiosity standpoint that I wanted to look at in St. Gabriel. But we went in and to a field at Blackberry Farms in Vacherie, Louisiana, and we put Germaxon out at the at several different rates. But I pulled out the 3 pint rates because that's the labeled rate, and want to look at it at a March application versus an April application, and Dr. Doug did the same thing at USDA in Houma, and basically it correlated to a 4-leaf stage for that March application and an 8-leaf stage in that April application. Um, the field was weed free. The check was the farmer standard. When we harvested this cane for yield, um, statistically, the March and check treatments were exactly the same for tons, TRS, and sugar per acre. But you can kind of look and see a negative trend for the tonnage and for sugar per acre. When we get to that April application, we definitely decrease tonnage and we definitely decrease sugar per acre. Um, so it just kind of, I guess, amplifies, what we know about 299. It's sensitive to herbicide. Again, we don't know what the impact of the ryegrass competition season long would have caused. So we would have had some yield decrease if we were competing with ryegrass. So I mean, it's one of the things we have to do is put out herbicides. One of the other things we looked at is a couple other products, and we did this work on the Sugar Research Station. We wanted to look at Fusilade. Fusilade was looked at as a ripener for Dr. Ben, with Dr. Ben, but it's also a grass herbicide. So we looked at a 12-ounce rate, and then we looked at the herbicide Liberty, which is glufosinate. Both of these products are not registered for use in cane, but we wanted to look at their impact. I didn't have any information on their impact, so they were put over the top of cane in April. We also included Germaxon in this treatment. Here, this was some second stubble 299 in St. Gabriel. And when we look at the Germaxon treatment, we significantly reduced the tonnage to the neighborhood of about 5 tons per acre. So that's pretty significant. But when we look at sugar per acre, we can't shake out a difference. Fusilade hammered it, from down to 21 tons per acre and about 4,300 pounds of sugar. So that's definitely a no-no. The Liberty, decreased tonnage a little bit. But when we look at sugar per acre, it's still in that 8,000 pound range. And it kind of surprised me. A little bit of my reading, Liberty is actually labeled to apply over the top of cane in Australia. And it's not super good on ryegrass, but I'm hoping that we may be able to develop some other uses for it, and that the registrant will support this. So just something to look at down the road. Vaseygrass, another weed that we get a lot of calls about. We've tried to do a lot of work in 2018 and 2019 without success. We finally got a little lucky in 2020. Looking at some pre-emergence work, we collected a ton of seed from plants in St. Gabriel, planted them, and basically we put out this list of herbicides that are commonly labeled in cane. And before that, the only thing that I knew had really good pre-emergence control was hexazinone, which is Velosa or Velpar. And they had some literature saying that Trefline was really good on it, and that was literature from the Hawaiian sugar planters. But we didn't have any data. So I wanted to look at the S-metolachlor products and some of the other commonly used herbicides. So with that, we were able to derive a pretty good list of herbicides that have some efficacy in terms of pre-emerge. The Visor, which is the S-metolachlor, the Velosa we know, Carmex, which is Direx, did a really good job. Command, Lumax, and Treflan. So I mean, I think we have some choice to use. We were real heavily using metribuzin, the tricor, for a long time in our industry, and I think it's why this weed kind of became more to the forefront of being a problematic weed. Is it doesn't do a really good job controlling Vaseygrass, period. So um, when we did that work, we went back and collected some more seed. That rate that we had used for the visor was 1.22 quarts in the previous study. So I want to see how low we can go down on that S-metolachlor molecule and gain efficacy for this weed. So we put it out at a pint and a half, and 2 pints. This work was done in July. Um, and when we get out 49 days, we still have above 90% control with a pint. So I really was thinking this S-metolachlor product would really have just a primary fit to try to controlling ryegrass in that winter application. I don't believe that's the case now. I think it'll have a much broader fit for our industry. A little bit of weed identification. I'm going to let Kenneth tell me which one's the Vaseygrass. 1, 2, 3, or 4, Kenneth?
Which one got hairs, Al?
Uh, well, the answer is number 3. First one is brown top panicum. Second one's Amazon springletop. The third is Vasey. The fourth is the Johnson grass seedling. When you're looking at identifying it, Vasey grass has this little ridged tinge where on that leaf surface is the only weed that I know of it and Dallas grass that you'll see that. So that's one of the kind of keys to look at. So we'll move on. Talking about Vaseygrass. What's the Hippocratic Oath? Ken? Do no harm,
Do no
correct?
harm.
So, we had a situation where a grower chose to use Asialox on cane. So this is regardless if we're going after Vaseygrass, if you're going after Johnson grass or itch grass, the same holds true. Sugarcane injury is more likely when Asialox is applied to sugarcane under stress from drought or excessive moisture, and especially after high temperatures after June 1st. So this is a field that I was called to in Maurice, Louisiana. And you got to wonder if the cure was worse than the weed. Now, there was a ton of Vaseygrass plants in this field. This is a picture in June. But I'm not so sure he didn't cost himself a whole lot more yield than he needed to. I think I would have just left with the weed. But when we zoom in to the in that field, and they just had thousands of little bitty Vaseygrass seedlings germinating. So this is a high pressure situation. I told this grower here I'd be using the max label of S-metolachlor. I'd put it out in 3 shots, 3 times a year. I mean, there's just that much pressure. Actually, I had a call this morning wanting to know what temperature Vaseygrass germinated at because they were thinking about putting out some S-metolachlor this morning. So that's something to work on. Wrapping it up, just an update. All the new Paraquat manufactured in small non-bulk systems will have a new container. This is a lock and load type container where you're not going to be able to remove the cap anymore and pour it out of a jug. So growers are going to have to transition. They're going to have to get this little connector where it'll pour in their tank. So whenever they're loading the product, and this is of December 30, 2020, this went into effect. Right now, Paraquat's under registration review. They sent out for public comment, and here are a couple of the proposed changes that could affect the sugarcane industry. It's going to prohibit the aerial application of gramoxone except for in cotton. You're not going to be able to use it with a handgun or backpack sprayer anymore. It's going to require a closed cab tractor or a PF10 respirator in areas where less than 80 hours are treated. Um, the reentry interval is going to be 48 hours, and then you're going to have a mandatory spray drift management labeling on the label. As far as metribuzin, there's a proposed that we limit the amount of metribuzin used in our industry to 1 pound a year. That's still on the docket at EPA. It was supposed to be ruled in at the beginning of 2020. We still don't have a ruling on it. We're hopeful that means it's going in our direction and in our favor. So with that, that is the end of my presentation, Ken, and I will turn it over to Doug.